Are you ready to make an investment in your future?
Yes!
Are you ready to take back what you are owed?
Yes!
Are you ready to fully commit yourselves to Satan?
Yes!
Who are you?
I'm the pizza guy. A girl.
Are you by any chance a virgin?
That's a very personal question.
She's a virgin. Whose power unlocks our true potential?
Hail Satan!
Do you have any idea what's happening here tonight?
Hail Satan!
They are summoning Baphomet, the big demon from hell. And when that clock strikes 12, he is gonna rip you open.
Friends of family and strangers, and my family used to rape me, make me abort the babies I had.
It would be hard to imagine more misery and suffering than what Teresa says she's had to endure.
And us kids would be made to do things with the adults and the animals, and then a sacrifice would happen.
The sacrifice? Were these animal sacrifices?
Animals and people.
On what scale do you think this was happening?
Enormous, far beyond what we've ever heard of here before.
Teresa's mother, Bridget.
You're talking about mass murder?
Yes, on a scale that this country's never heard of before. It's like the old people's homes now.
For the first time, Teresa is learning what it's like to live with love instead of fear. In this quiet English village, with the help of her mother, she's slowly repairing her broken life. Teresa is now 15, but at the age of 2, she was left in the care of this woman, the grandma she called Nan. And that, she says, is when her torment started.
Who was the leader? Who was the boss of the gang, of the cult?
At home it was my nan.
Your Nan made you have sex with animals?
Yeah. Like goats and donkeys.
The story of Teresa is a story almost too horrible to recount. A case of child abuse that goes well beyond the kind of things we normally associate with the abuse of children. In 27 years of reporting, it has to be one of the most painful stories I have ever had to tell.
How many men or how many people would have sex with you?
What, at one time?
Yes.
About everyone who was there, which must have been about 20. You know, from 10 to 20 people. If it was a big ceremony, it used to be 30.
What would your grandma be doing when these men were forcing themselves on you?
Usually laughing. Or smiling. Or having sex with another man. Or other men.
A chronicle of debauchery and depravity so horrific it's hard to believe. You have to ask yourself, could Teresa be just making it up?
No. I know what's true and what's not. No, I know what I saw.
Children don't make up elaborate lies that this would have to be if it was a lie, which I know it is not. It isn't.
This could... What do you guys think happened?
One of the players Robbie played with got carried away and killed him.
That's kind of far out.
Mazes and Monsters is a far-out game. Swords, poison, spells, battles, maiming, killing.
Hey, it's all imagination.
Is it?
You have stumbled into the abyss of fire. You are no more.
I have a spell to save me.
There is no protection. You will burn forever and ever in eternal torment. You are no more.
No.
Go. Game goes on. Roll.
I've reached the deepest dungeon. I'm now Lord of the Little People.
The treasure is in your sight. Power beyond imagination for the winner, to wield for all eternity. Fate turns her face against you. The dragon has you in its mouth. The dragon slowly closes its mouth.
No! I'll do anything. I must win.
There's only one way to save yourself. And that way is blood.
Blood?
David, honey, I'll be right back.
Only blood will satisfy the dragon. Yours are one of the little people you control. You may substitute their blood for your life, but without a sacrifice, you lose all. You die a horrible death. You lose the power.
All right, so there's a bunch of stuff in here that we can kind of unpack, but you know, the biggest thing, a lot of times what comes up in, you know, on the internet, on social media, even, you know, our own comments and our own videos is, you know, this accusation of bad DMing. And we see it happen really quick, I feel like. And first of all, I just want to say that anyone that goes to the other side of the screen and takes the initiative to run the game for other people, you know, I think they deserve a little bit of leeway. Instead of just accusing them of bad DMing, let's remember that there's other players at the table as well.
As though that the more that I involved myself in the game, the more depressed I started to feel.
And a 7 charisma.
The dark shadows of the day soon crept into Mike's dreams as wild, grisly nightmares haunted his sleep.
I would see just horrific, awful, just bloody and horrible creatures hacking at my friends, and I would stand there and watch my friends as they would be just hacked apart, and they were just incredibly grisly. And I would wake up at night, you know, oftentimes I'd be so upset that I would not be able to sleep.
Imagine that the media coverage about this Lil Nas X scandal has been mostly about how Christians are reacting to it, how they are offended, how they're falling into a new satanic panic, how they're too stupid to see the provocative humor and the social message in all of this.
To me, the potential message to the youth in this video is that you can find strength in being exactly who you are, whoever that is.
So let's be honest, this is what the whole circus is about getting attention. Like I said at the outset, it's not arbitrary that this image was put out there just before Easter. You see, Satanism has systematically been about Christianity from its very beginning. And especially modern pop Satanism, with all the contemporary popular imagery out there, from Anton LaVey's celebrity status and his movie acting to bands like Black Sabbath and other forms of heavy metal Satanism. All these upside down crosses, the black masses, the celebration of sin and of our passions are all about embodying, in a narrative, in a mythological setting, the end of Christianity. And by embodying, it's the end of its hold on the mythic narrative or the social narrative. But secretly and unknowingly, it is restating it. But that's for another time that we could talk about that. Once one understands this, many things will appear to us more clearly. Even the ironic aspect of Satanism and cultural provocations like the satanic shoes or this Montero video. You see, Satanism is irony itself, you could say. From its ritual version of the black masses to its more philosophical social manifestation, it is the Christian story restated from its upside down, from its narrative margin. Satanism is something like the gargoyle as priest, the rebel as king. And the theatrics, the joke of Satanism, is one of the most important considerations of its meaning and its purpose, and ultimately of its satanic qualities. So if you ask a LaVey-style Satanist about their religion, they'll tell you that they actually don't believe in Satan. This is, of course, difficult for Christians who order their lives on truth and faith to understand. People ask themselves, why would they go to such efforts for something they don't even believe in? And of course, such a reaction comes from decent, normal, healthy people who can't see how there's nothing more satanic than believing both God and Satan actually don't exist, though all the while acting in this self-righteous pride and resentment in order to offend Christians and destroy their hierarchy of meanings by ritually and mythologically embodying everything that Christians oppose. Always remember that the Montero video ends with putting of the satanic crown on oneself. All of this is what happened recently in the whole Baphomet statue hubbub that surrounded the Satanic Temple in the United States. In embracing the very ambiguous and egalitarian American notion of religious freedom, these satanic pranksters are able to show how Americans are potentially Satanists because they must equally, an emphasis on equally, include the parody and opposite of what most of them believe in. In a traditional world, there's a hierarchy, the monsters, the demons, the gargoyles, and especially the Satan or the opponent are on the outside, or they're underground, they're below us. And it's best to actually not even pronounce their names. But now, in the context of liberty and equality driving social forms, the figure of Satan begins to appear as a dark prophet of the modern world, a noble Promethean who tragically stood against authority and declared himself equal to that which was above him. In the Montero video, Lil Nas X gets it right. Satanic imagery has never ultimately been about worshiping the devil, but rather about embodying the revolutionary pattern through the type of pride exemplified by Satan in his war against heaven, and which ends with self-worship and self-crowning. And obviously it can't really end that way, for Montero's only claim to the crown of horns is violence and revolution, which means that there is always another pole-riding, lap-dancing, person in line waiting to kill Montero and to take the crown from him. But let's just say that that's another story as well. One of the tropes of the anti-Christian religious scholar of the past decades has been to point to how idiosyncratic the devil of pop Satanism actually is. The brooding red demon, the horns, the trident, the goat-like appearance, all of this, they tell us, is just an early modern development which grew with layers of additions in time, from this horned monster that we see present in late medieval images of the Last Judgment, through these frenzied descriptions of witches and devils in the Malleus Maleficarum. This Malleus is the hammer of witches, which was the famous text used in early modern witch trials. We move then to Milton's Lucifer and Faust's Mephistopheles. So these pompous religious scholars remind us that this figure has little to do with what early Christians believed. And as usual, these scholars, for all their factual accuracies, are simply missing the point. The transformation of the evil one from a shadowy and ambiguous character in early Christian and even Jewish imagination to the tragic romantic figure he has become is one of the narrative threads we could follow to trace the development of Western society all the way into our present state of crisis. This narrative development does not end in Milton, but actually continues to grow in post-Milton representations, such as the one we see in Neil Gaiman's The Season of Mist graphic novel. This characterization has actually become the basis for the Lucifer Netflix show. So historically, this transformation actually follows the return to pagan references, and this return has been a tool of revolution from the beginning. It becomes an image of secularism, which informs much of the Renaissance and Enlightenment, and accelerates into the modern age. In fact, the culminating figure of Satan in popular imagination, this figure that attracted Mick Jagger's sympathy, has its precedent in Aeschylus's Prometheus Bound. This ancient Greek tragedy, the Titan, punished for bringing humans knowledge, is presented as a noble resistance to the tyrannical father. And seeing all this, one will come to realize that there's absolutely nothing arbitrary about the golden Prometheus statue in Rockefeller Plaza. All of this follows a narrative thread, which is the very story of modernity. So the reason why the Satanic Temple wanted to put up this stupid image of Baphomet in the United States is, believe it or not, the culmination of the same process which made Napoleon Bonaparte fill his Arc de Triomphe with Roman gods. And I wonder if Napoleon could perceive that this gesture of declaring himself emperor while putting a crown on his own head would culminate in the solipsistic video by a pole dancing rapper who seduces the devil to then only kill him and put the crown on himself. One of the historical moments where we can trace the origin of modern occultism and Satanism is when the Knights Templar were disbanded in the 14th century. The legitimacy of the accusations made against them is still being discussed interminably by historians. But in terms of social narrative, it doesn't matter so much if you believe the accusations against the Templars or not. It is quite possible that they did not practice sodomy, they didn't blaspheme against the cross or worship a strange god named Baphomet. In the same vein, in terms of what we're seeing today, it doesn't matter if you believe the accusations against witches in the early modern period either, of these descriptions of their Sabbath masses and their fornicating with demons. Of course, one could argue about this in historical terms, and people can do this interminably until they forget the original point of why such an accusation matters. What matters most is how these new possibilities, which appeared at the end of the Middle Ages, became something like a narrative space, where the opposite of Christianity, which was more implicit before, began to explicitly take form in the form of explicit sacrilege and certain types of parody of inversion, and ultimately embracing the opposite of everything that Christians value. So we mostly need to see these accusations as an opening up and recognizing of certain possibilities. We could call it something like a narrative space, which showed us the edge and the end of Christianity. And this Antichrist was slowly filled as Christianity itself began to falter and to break apart in the modern age. And it was through these very tools and this very imagery, whether consciously or unconsciously, that Christianity would be attacked by its own dissidents. It's by these very means that it would be inverted and subverted, until even these new pseudo-religions like Satanism and Wicca would explicitly take on, identify, and expand the very tropes which were manifested in those early modern fears. So even if the accusations against the Templars were fabricated, we arrive nonetheless through a strange process of development through Enlightenment, the 19th century, to the occultists there like Eliphas Levi and Aleister Crowley, through Bulgakov and the band Slayer. We come to a point where we have this massively popular and honestly not at all edgy video which won attention for its sacrilege and allusion to being sodomized by a devil. Ultimately, the figure of this devil is itself a culmination of this late medieval Baphomet who haunted the Templars in the 14th century. You see, stories have patterns. Stories play themselves out naturally, and once the narrative elements have been cast, there will always be people, events, and organizations to embody them in a very factual and incarnate way. But the material causes by which this will happen are actually quite secondary to the more spiritual reason. You see, when Christ said, "Judge not, lest you be judged," this was not just this finger-wagging moralizing. He was telling people how reality works, how the projecting of our sins onto our enemies, this focused attention on the sin of others, opens up the space of our own end. It gives us a glimpse of what is possible in the store. It gives us a riddle of our own Sphinx. And it is by this very Sphinx that we run the danger of being devoured. Besides the strange movement from Baphomet to Montero, a good example to help people understand what I'm trying to describe and what is happening is that, according to the Malleus Maleficarum, this book about witchcraft that I mentioned earlier and that was published in the early modern period, according to this book, the purpose of witches was to prevent normal reproductive relationships between men and women, doing this out of resentment. And they accomplished this by several ways. By, for example, seducing men away from their wives, by using disincarnate female demonic phantasm, or succubi, so that men would lose their seed, by making it so women have children from incubi, these demonic males, but actually also through, let's say, through the material causes of having children by other men besides their husbands. And also by killing and harming children, aborting babies, and ultimately, yes, by removing the male member altogether.
Every single day, I can have my chain yanked by Satan, and it's up to me to see it and to stay grateful. A huge bedrock of this entire spirituality, or entire spiritual battle, is gratitude. Gratitude. Every day being grateful. Yesterday, I felt a little ungrateful. And it was because one of my friends who does contracting for the government, he's pretty high up, he knows a lot of stuff that's happening. He was kind of explaining to me why I got canceled because, you know, comedy and biblical stuff, it's a uniter, and right now they're trying to fracture everyone, atomize them, get the ants to fight. China and Russia, a lot of these oligarchs want to buy up all the American cities, turn it into Detroit, you know, and I'm like, fuck. And then I had this feeling, which is literally from Satan. Oh, and one of the reasons that Islamic scholars know a lot about Satan, guys, if you live in this world, okay, if you live in the Sahara Desert and you can still hurt animals, you know traps. And that desert, to me, I talked about this in the beginning, it's like the amount of fortitude you need, because like this is easy to forget about Satan. Look at this, look at this. All right, look at that, look at where I live. You know, it's so easy for me to forget about the tricks of Satan because I live in a form of paradise. Granted, don't get me wrong, like the winters get very cold and isolated, and because of a lot of my faith and deeds and morality, I've ended up in a place so beautiful, I believe. But every day is a test. And dude, the forest could burn, the skies could turn red, everything could flood, this could become a desert. How can I still have goats in a desert? That's something that I'll listen to. And so the way Satan is always, and you have to understand Satan's relationship with God. And this is a metaphysical reality. Okay, so God created Adam to have dominion over earth, and Satan was jealous. And just like gamma males, or just like any demonic activity you see, the devil, the demon, the gamma would rather you fail than him succeed. As you can see in some of my comment sections, which I just weed like a garden, we'll get to gardening. It's like someone who hates me that watches every stream is of the devil, in my opinion. If you like realize you hate someone and you spend every day listening to hours of them talking just so that you can figure out a strategy to get people to not like them, that's demonic. That's the definition of demonic. And it's not the person doing it. They're under the spells of demons because of their lack of, gardening. Can they get out of that? Of course. Yeah, absolutely. Everyone can get out of that. Everyone's done that. Everyone fights that every single day. I don't fight envy. I fight pride. I mean, gluttony, pride, all of it. It's right there. But you have to know, if you don't think you have a weakness to Satan, it's even worse because you're not even aware of it. Catholic intellectuals are literally a weakness of Satan to me because of my dad. Does that mean it controls my life? Am I constantly freaking? No, but it's there. It's a little flower. Deep, and just like Inception, you got to get down layers of it. And just to get me to flare up, just to get me to curse a guy I like E. Michael Jones. Granted, I was being funny about it, but there was a little bit of I enjoyed it a little. That's not good. And so the way the devil can get to you is this guy was talking about how on the right side, it's through false piety, through your great works, I've given so much to charity, I can, do this, or I can recite the Bible, I can, I have a church, I'm a special boy, like that type of shit. The left is, the false pride. Like my right hand Satan attack would be, you've built a community, Big Bear, you stood up against Hollywood. Who are these people to tell you anything? And the reality is, that's bullshit, that I'm actually more vulnerable to a lot of satanic attacks than a lot of other people because the eyes are on me more. So don't get me wrong, I understand this and I'm pretty good at it, but it's there. It's there for my ego to spark up. I felt it, to say because your ego develops to, if you have a soft heart, I have a soft heart. There's people that are mangoes and people that are coconuts. Mangoes appear soft. Paul from Pockets was talking about how one of the masters from the Heartfulness meditation thing was talking about this, how they said Trump was a coconut and Hillary was a mango, how Trump had a hard exterior and a soft interior, and Hillary had a soft exterior and a hard interior. I have a very soft interior, very naive, very trusting, and so my exterior can become very braggadocious, egotistical, fighty, confrontational, because I'm trying to keep, it's just like a chessboard. I'm trying to keep people away from my heart. And other people are the opposite. Like all these Hollywood celebrities have just a hard as rock, dead heart. And their exterior is like, we're saving the children, we're saving, and I have the opposite. I'm like, fuck the children, you're all a bunch of liars. And then they cut that up and they say, oh, Owen Benjamin hates the children. When in reality, what they're doing is fake, and their interior is so hard because their life is completely surrounded. It's only their ego. Tim Dillon was talking about that on Rogan. I don't watch Rogan because I don't like Rogan. That's how you should live your life, gammas.